There were some surprises in Governor Murphy's proposed budget for 2025. Listen as we break it all down. This is the Issues Watch podcast. Hi, I'm Jeff Kazerman, Vice President of Government Relations at the New Jersey Society of CPAs, and welcome to the Issues Watch podcast. On March 20th, we held a live broadcast with two public policy experts, Dale Florio and Chris Emmerholz, to examine Governor Murphy's proposed budget for New Jersey's 2025 fiscal year. In this podcast episode, we're going to share segments from the live broadcast. Dale is a strategic advisor at Princeton Public Affairs Group and is considered one of the top lobbyists in New Jersey. He has worked on behalf of the NJCPA for years. Chris is the Chief Government Affairs Officer at the New Jersey Business and Industry Association. He covers taxation, budget, and economic development. Okay, let me get things started with some highlights of the budget proposal. The total budget is $56 billion, which is 3% higher than fiscal year 24. This equals the inflation rate. There's a structural budget gap of $1.8 billion. This gap is being filled by funds from the budget surplus. There's a drop in budget reserves from $8.3 billion to $6.1 billion. There's a 2.5% hike in corporate taxes for corporations with net income over $10 million. About 40% of the entire budget, $23.6 billion, is going to school and municipal aid. Direct funding for schools is up $900 million to a total of $11.66 billion. There's also a $124 million hike for preschool education. Municipal aid is cut by $134 million to just over $1.6 billion. There's a $3.3 billion payment for debt service. The proposal also includes a full public workers' pension payment of $7.2 billion. Which would make this the fourth year in a row that the actuarially required payment will be made. There's also $6 billion in health benefit payments to active and retired public employees. The anchor property tax relief program will be continued. That's $2 billion. And there's $200 million for pre-funding of the Stay New Jersey property tax relief program, which will not be up and running until at least 2026. Personally, I'm not too happy with this proposed budget, but I'm also not very surprised. We recently surveyed NJCPA members about the proposed budget, and 76% said that it would make the economy worse over the long term. 11% said the economy will stay the same, and only 12% felt it would improve the economy. Turning to our experts, I asked Dale whether he thinks this is a good budget, a bad budget, or somewhere in between. Here's what he had to say.
On the one hand, Jeff, the administration has signaled that revenues are declining, right? That the years ahead don't look very good, but yet they spend $1.5 billion budget. So they're sending cross messages. Right. So I think for the first time in 4 or 5 years, or certainly since part of the pandemic and most of the pandemic, this is going to be a very difficult budget. The governor is still looking to add new programs at a time when revenues are declining. So they're robbing Peter to pay Paul, and I know we're going to talk a little bit more about how they're doing that.
Right.
But it's going to set up a confrontation. I mean, all you had to do was listen to yesterday's public hearing on the budget, and all of the social services groups, the hospitals, community colleges coming in and saying, we need more, don't cut this, we need more. And I just don't know where it's going to come.
And here's what Chris had to say.
I think this is a bad budget for the business community, Jeff. And I love to see research from your members, the CPAs throughout the state. And And obviously when they're concerned, I think they understand budgeting, they understand numbers, they understand what these mean in real terms for the businesses that are their clients. And those CPAs are right. They have reason to be concerned. I think a lot has changed in a year where last year, I might have said it to you and the CPAs that was the most pro-business. The sixth Murphy budget last year was the most pro-business budget that Governor Murphy proposed. Now the seventh one, we are opposed. This is a bad budget, and we look at it through the lens of this corporate business tax increase, a massive 20% increase in corporate business taxes, $1 billion. The governor is asking corporations to pay more of. Those are our job creators. Those are the folks that build new facilities. Those are the folks that innovate. We want to be an innovation state. Those are the folks that create those stronger and fairer jobs the governor wants. This budget's not going to help that.
Next, we jumped right into what business leaders and political insiders consider the most controversial aspect of this proposal: the permanent 2.5% hike in taxes for corporations with more than $10 million in net earnings. We started by watching a clip from Governor Murphy's budget address.
As our friends in the press are fond of reminding me, I have said many times that I would fix NJ Transit even if it killed me. Bear with me. I appear to still have a pulse, but better yet, I have a new proposal to support NJ Transit for years to come. Because pulling NJ Transit out of a crisis, that was just doing our job. Our promise was to fix NJ Transit so it can become the world-class transportation system we need it to be. And with our budget, we're going to build on our progress in fixing NJ Transit in a way which is consistent with our vision for a stronger and fairer New Jersey. Today, we are proposing a corporate transit fee. It will provide a dedicated funding stream for NJ Transit at no additional cost to our working families. With this fee, we're going to ask the biggest corporations with net incomes greater than $10 million to support NJ Transit's future. And we will raise this revenue without placing any new burdens on small and medium-sized businesses. In fact, nearly 2,500 companies will see their taxes decrease from last year.
The governor referred to this as a corporate transit fee, but the reality is that it's a permanent extension of the 2.5 surcharge that expired on December 31st. This proposal, which came on the heels of the governor promising for months that he would let the surcharge expire, put the business community in a state of shock. In our member survey, 78% of respondents opposed the fee, citing that the increase will prompt businesses to leave New Jersey. They said that New Jersey needs to focus on shrinking government, not imposing new taxes. I asked Chris to explain the nuts and bolts of the tax.
So our understanding is that the tax that was temporary, that just expired, was on companies that had a net income over $1 million. There was 3,100 of them in the state. Now the governor's office and Treasury Department tells us there's 600 companies that have a net income over 10 million, and this 2.5% surtax is going to go back on those 600, and that's expected to raise $1 billion in the proposed budget, and in the ballpark of 800 million going forward in the future. It's expected to be permanent. And the frustrating thing, and I'm sure you've heard from some of your members, I've heard from my members, like, oh, can we see language? Can we see legislation? And unfortunately, we always know that it might be midnight, June 23rd, where we see actually bill language on this. But we're expecting it to be permanent. We have to get into the details on what that $10 million exactly means. But we have to make sure that we do all we can right now to try to stop this, because I think it is, as I said, it's an affront to the business community. $1 billion tax increase on the corporations. And I know a lot of times I hear from some of the supporters of this that, oh, they can afford it. These are the biggest companies in the world. It's not about affordability. It's about competitiveness. And we have our state just next door, just over the Delaware River, Pennsylvania. They are in the middle of a bipartisan multi-year phase down. They used to be, when we were number one in the nation on corporate taxes, they were number two. They just did a bipartisan plan. Governor Wolf, he worked with the legislature. Governor Shapiro was doubling down on it. to take it from 9.9 to 4.9, cut it in half, their taxes. And that matters. That matters for our competitiveness. That matters for companies making decisions about where to relocate or expand. We want them to think about bringing those jobs and bringing that capital investment to New Jersey. This is something that hurts them.
I then asked Chris why the governor did an about-face on the CBT.
I certainly cannot speak for Governor Murphy and the Murphy administration. What I will say is there truly is a fiscal cliff in NJ Transit. The crazy thing is it's not till next year, not FY25, it's an FY26 issue, but they will have a hole in their budget. Now, they're going to have a hole in their budget. Have we adequately looked at them for reforms to make them more efficient? So maybe they don't need as much money. Maybe they should reform because maybe we'll never get back to the amount of people using trains and buses that we used to get. I love that idea, and I love that it's important for New Jersey to have people wanting to go into downtown New York, downtown Philadelphia, to use all the mass transit resources that we have. We have great infrastructure in the state. That's an asset of ours. It's important. We got to invest in that. BIA always believes you should invest in transportation, but can we figure out how to find that investment through the time-honored approaches of just time and discipline, as we did with ramping up our pension aid, ramping up our school aid, good things to do. We didn't necessarily say, oh, we need to increase taxes by $1 billion or else we can't afford to do this. Naturally, the budget grows over time with inflation, with natural revenue growth, with the growth of the economy. Can we figure out how to use that growth and be a little disciplined in our other spending to prioritize it for transportation or Speaker Coughlin's Stay in J plan or school aid reforms or higher ed, whatever it is? We don't need new taxes. We are one of the most taxed states in the country. Let's figure out a way to look at spending. It's not a revenue problem, it's a spending problem.
Right. I then turned to Dale to get an understanding of the politics behind this and whether he was surprised.
Not really, because really the first person that talked about this transit tax was the Senate president, right? He was the one that said, hey, we've got a problem here, right? And we should think about it. There's also something else going on in New Jersey that, whether it's true or not, the optics of it suggests that maybe, with the governor's wife running for the U.S. Senate, there's the optics of her politics and his politics. And as everybody knows, the progressive advocates have been pushing very hard to keep the surcharge in place, right? I mean, they haven't gone away on that. It's been very consistent. That's an important constituency for Tammy Murphy and her run for the U.S. Senate. So again, the cynic kind of looks at all of these things and says, yeah, maybe, okay. And again, it's the optics of this conversation, because when you look at this year's budget, there's not $1 billion going into the transit budget this year. It's about $200 million. You can placate the progressives by keeping the tax on, and there you go. We'll see what happens in November.
One of the broadcast attendees asked whether the legislature can guarantee that the corporate transit fee revenue actually funds New Jersey Transit. Here's what Chris and Dale had to say about that.
Well, I would say that's the $1 million question. Maybe it's appropriate to say the $1 billion question. I think unless something is constitutionally dedicated, the dedication doesn't mean much. And so far, we have not seen a proposal from the governor or legislature to constitutionally dedicate it. And my worry, and Dale astutely said this, is that there's so many other spending needs out there. I think there's people in the legislature that just see a new bucket of $1 billion that can go to solve a bunch of holes. So we call it NJ Transit. Maybe you can politically sell it as that, but it could help with a host of the spending needs that are out there. So I do worry about that, because if you know what, this is corporate money, and if the corporate community is going to step forward and do this, I'd much rather see it go to actually something like transportation investments than just go to balance the budget. My worry is that you can't trust that it's going to be dedicated. I hope it doesn't happen at all, but if it's going to happen, let's dedicate it to actually something that will create jobs, grow the economy, build new things. I don't want to just plug in the hole in NJ Transit's budget that is actually maintaining what they do. I want, let's bring NJ Transit and mass transit to South Jersey, Northwest Jersey, where there's a lack of those transportation resources. Let's figure out how you build new things to attract people to New Jersey and make our existing transportation infrastructure more attractive. It can't be just maintenance, but even with that, I think the dedication is definitely a big uncertainty until we see a constitutional resolution to do that.
So what that means is that the legislature would have to pass a concurrent resolution to place the question on the ballot for the voters to say, yes, we want to dedicate this amount, this corporate surcharge money for the purposes of New Jersey Transit. So it's an involved process. Most governors don't like dedications,
Can't play with it.
because, it's easy to say this money's going to go for that. And then when you get to budget time, they move the money around. So we'd have to go through that process, have the voters approve it, to then create that lockbox, that dedication of those funds for that purpose.
Right.
It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Next, we talked about how fiscally sound the budget is. Here's what the governor had to say about fiscal responsibility and dealing with economic uncertainty.
The fact is that right now, millions of families across New Jersey, indeed, frankly, across America, are making tough decisions about where to cut costs and how to save more money at the end of the month. Bless you again. And frankly, those kitchen table conversations are no different than the conversations that we're having right here in Trenton. At a moment of economic uncertainty and unease, how do we, as a state, move forward? Well, here's the good news. We are prepared to meet this moment. New Jersey is prepared to face our challenges confidently, capably, and ambitiously. And we are prepared because over the past 6+ years together, all of us, we have restored fiscal responsibility while remaining true to our values. We have saved money where we can, so we can invest more where it counts, strengthening the economic and societal foundation of New Jersey. Our proposed budget will once again lower costs for middle and working class families, as well as seniors, by providing another round of historic tax relief. And that includes the single largest property tax relief program in our history, the Anchor program. Last year, it provided more than $2.2 billion in direct relief to millions of homeowners, renters, and especially seniors. I'm pleased to say that our budget will include a surplus of over $6 billion, which will prepare us for any rainy days that lie ahead. And I think this is what fiscal responsibility is all about.
I asked Chris how he feels the budget proposal rates in the area of fiscal responsibility.
Well, I think Governor Murphy and the legislature deserve credit for, in the past couple of years, getting to that 100% pension payment. This year, for the first time, getting to that 100% school aid payment. That fees and funds, the surplus building up. But I almost think now you need to be bold and use that surplus. Like, surplus is there to stabilize your taxes and stabilize your spending in that rainy day. So again, we avoid that roller coaster policy. I would argue if you have $1 billion tax increase that some people think might be necessary, maybe we're in that rainy day and maybe you dip into that surplus a little more than otherwise. Now, yes, it's going down from the 8.7 to the 6.1 that you said at the top of the discussion, but I would argue maybe you dip into that a little more and then you look at spending efficiencies to avoid tax increases. But the fact that you still have a $6.1 billion surplus is good, but let's avoid some of the shocks and traumas that come with big tax increases or big spending cuts to things that we all think are important. And let's look at some of the spending in here that might not be that formulaic operational things that we think are good investments and things that maybe come as that one-time asks that were added in recent budgets. So I think there's more that can be done to make this budget responsible. And I think the biggest one in terms of the irresponsibility is, and again, something you mentioned at the top of the discussion, is the structural imbalance, that we are spending more money than we're bringing in. When you do that, you do have to eat into your surplus. And over time, as we saw recently with both the Sweeney Center at Rowan and Garden State Initiative put out recent reports about we're basically getting to a place where if spending keeps going up, surplus keeps going down to cover that spending, and that structural imbalance will catch up with us. And no one knows exactly when it is. We don't know how the economy and revenue are going to continue to perform. Hopefully they get better and we grow organically.
Next, we talked about the budget making process, which seems to have gotten worse and worse. Over the years, numerous budget process reforms have been proposed. I asked Chris to explain them.
Starting off on the good news, I do think the idea that became bill and became law that came out of the CPA Society, came out of one of your members, Walter Brash, his brainchild, and that became law, and that is going to require a better fiscal reporting on what that annual report looks like that the legislature will be aware of, and we made sure it was in this legislation that includes how New Jersey stacks up against other states in terms of our spending, in terms of our debt, other liabilities. So I think anything we can do to make this process more transparent is a good thing for taxpayers. I think that transparency leads to more moderation and leads to less of us being an outlier in spending, as we've talked about earlier today, or outliers in taxation, as we've talked about. I think, so thank you to the CPA Society for working with BIA and the business community to get that done. I think that's a good thing. I think the consensus forecasting, the multi-year revenue stress testing, we've seen some movement, and we've seen it pass a committee, pass a house, not the other house, or never get up for a vote, or not get signed, like things like that. So we've seen some movement. I think all of those will make our system more transparent, because I think we need to do a better job, like businesses do, like sometimes accountants are doing for their businesses, thinking about what revenues will look like down the road, thinking of what spending will look like down the road, thinking about what long-term maintenance, long-term new products, long-term what the customers and clients will be like down the road. All of that long-term thinking is a good and healthy thing for the state. There are other states that do this, whether it's NJ Spotlight deserves a lot of credit. John Wright Myers did some great reporting on this, and how we need to get better at that. I think Pew Center, Volcker Institute have put out there some of the best practices that we should follow. So I think we know what to do. And I think that the work of the Sweeney Center, getting back to them, it touched upon some of these things that we should be doing, and trying to put that multi-year revenue and spending plan out there. But again, anything we can do to make our system more transparent moderates us and is good for the taxpayer.
Then Dale discussed why it's so hard to implement any of these reforms.
Jeff, I wish I could be more optimistic about this. No, seriously, because it is a serious matter. I mean, I could have given you that, cynical response. That'll never happen. I don't know if this next crisis, because of the amount of money that we had, which in all my years, I've never seen a state government have as much money as we've had. So I don't know if the rise, maybe the fall will be deeper than will be commensurate, right? Because we've spent so much, we've uplifted so many different types of programs that are now going to be stressed and may have to get cut, right? So our fall may be deeper, that might precipitate the need for these kind of emergency matters. I would think as a governor or a legislature, I would want these tools, right, to help explain to the public why we can't do things, why we can do things. That's how I would look at it.
Right.
So if we start heading this way, some of these tools might have a chance. At least have a 2-year budgeting process.
Right.
Take a look at that. But pulling back to reality here for a second, the fact is that legislatures and governors want the maximum flexibility to make changes at any one particular time. Now, none of these tools say you wouldn't be able to do that. It's just that you might be going into the process with a lot more information and be able to see the future in a way that makes more sense.
Next, I asked Chris to talk about what the business community is doing to voice their concerns about the budget proposal.
Yeah, so I think what you've seen is a more united business community that has been more aggressively asserting itself, opposing what the governor's trying to get done in this budget. Example is just yesterday, it's the kind of the rite of passage every single spring is business community, our lobbyists, our government affairs folks are speaking on behalf of our members to the budget committees. But didn't happen this year. What happened is my boss, Michelle Sekurka, the president and CEO of NJCPA, president and CEO of the State Chamber of Commerce, president and CEO of the South Jersey Chamber of Commerce, they all spoke, not their lobbyists, but they spoke because we wanted to make sure, legislature, this is different. You guys have crossed the line. You guys are basically saying we're doing something anti-business here. And so we're trying to make sure that our reaction, our responses to this budget are different, because we do think the policy proposed here is different. And it's more of a punitive anti-business message than we've seen in recent years. Part of that is we have launched right now, it's a social media campaign. Hopefully some of the CPAs out there have seen it, but hashtag Do Better for Business. It's been all over LinkedIn and Facebook and some of the other places where you follow social stuff. But hopefully you will be seeing more on that soon, and maybe some things that go beyond social media. And look forward to working with the CPA Society, as we always do, because you guys are fantastic partners. And as Dale said, it's important to get the broader business community, and we're all working together on this. And I think you're seeing that. I hope that continues. I expect it to. Hopefully we can have a chance and look out for this campaign, because hopefully you guys can reach out. We will be engaging our voter voice system to reach out to your legislators to say you're upset about this. We were working with local chambers and our New Jersey Business Coalition that the BIA stood up a couple of years ago during the pandemic to make sure that all the business organizations of the whole state were on the same page during COVID-19 and all the impacts on the business community. And we've continued that to just kind of keep people on the same page. So the Business Coalition will be taking action. So that'll be something coming soon. We're asking local chambers to maybe do chamber board resolutions opposed to this business tax increase. So we're trying to do more of a grassroots effort, a social media campaign, maybe some other stuff out there, emails, advertisements. But it's something that I haven't seen us as assertive as we've been these past month or so in a long time. I think it's a good thing.
Yep.
It's not a good thing that we're fighting this tax, because we'd rather not be. It was much nicer last year when it was more positive budget. But still, it's again, a crisis leads to opportunity, and to bring people together and to maybe get some positive going on and make us more efficient, and maybe a little more focus on growing the economy instead of hurting the economy would be a good thing.
I asked Dale how the business community can fight back against the governor and legislature that are pretty progressive.
Listen, I wouldn't categorize the legislature as necessarily progressive. I really wouldn't. I mean, I think if you look at the two leaders, they're actually pretty moderate individuals, right? But they're political, right? But I would think, if you had a conversation with either of them, I think they're, center left, but not like far left. They're not in the governor's camp.
Right.
So I do think local pressure matters, right? I mean, it does. So, I mean, if Chris and the chamber and others can get their members in these districts to say, and talk about real examples of why this could impact me, I think it could make a difference. I really do. I don't think these guys want to do it.
Right.
The governor proposed it. They put this fantasy up there that it's going to transit. Transit has bigger problems. The money's not going to transit. So it can be won if you can really get into the grassroots of local businesses. I like the idea of getting local chambers doing their resolutions and getting their members motivated. I don't know why we don't, as business people, don't have the same passion levels as some of these social and health services.
Because they're working.
Because they're working, I guess. There you go, right?
As we wrapped up the presentation, I asked Chris and Dale for their closing thoughts. Here's what Chris had to say.
I would say in closing, I would ask three groups of people, whether it's our policymakers, just the public in general, and the members of BIA, the business community at large, is we need to do better for business. And so that campaign, please get involved.
Yeah.
I don't think we think about the rash of small business closings that we've seen in recent years. I don't think we think about just how much more expensive we are vis-a-vis other states and how that competitiveness matters. I don't think we think about the rash. You know what? Maybe if we are expensive, the amount of overregulation that businesses have to deal with on the labor side, environment side, and just it's hard to run a business here, whether it's on the corporate Fortune 500 company or if it's on the mom and pop in downtown Main Street. And the tax increase proposed in this budget, and also a lot of the cuts in this budget that are actually to business programs, like it's just unconscionable. And I don't think this budget does anything to make us more competitive. And the best way to grow our revenue is through organic natural revenue growth. And this budget is going to degenerate our revenues, go in the opposite direction on that.
Yep.
And so I'm worried about it, but we're going to be doing our best and working with the whole business community to try to make this budget a little more pro-business and whatever gets passed in June, and look forward to that process. Look forward to working with you, working with Dale and all your clients.
And now here are Dale's closing remarks.
I think worst case scenario, Jeff, here is that the amount of this budget as proposed by the governor, that'll be the cap, right? I'm going to say that'll be the cap. I don't think the legislature may ask for ads, but I think it'll say in the cap, meaning that things will then get moved around.
Okay.
Right. So I'm making that prediction. I hope
It's a good one.
I hope I'm right. But what happens below that cap and how things get moved around, that's where I think you referenced sausage before. If people knew how sausage was made, okay, they wouldn't eat it. So we've got a long way to go, as I said earlier, but I think that'll be the cap. And because I do think the legislature is looking at next year and the year after it and the year after that. And the governor's race has already started, and they're looking at that as well. So
Right.
I think they need to know that they got to start to pull back a little bit.
Big thanks to Chris and Dale for joining us to dissect the governor's budget proposal. I know I learned a lot, and I hope you did too. To follow the progress of the budget, visit njcpa.org/NJBudget. And to learn more about the Do Better for Business campaign, visit njbia.org/DoBetterForBusiness. Thanks for listening and watching.